Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my Tuesday live stream where we talk about photography and kind of what's new, what's going on. But today I have a special guest with me, Walter Rowe. He's a professional photographer here locally here in Maryland. Does mainly portrait photography. And I've known Walter, gosh, maybe I don't know, 20 years at least. I don't know. He'll know better than I am. My memory's not that good, but since college, really. And we met through a mutual friend that he ended up marrying, and we've just kind of hung out ever since. And actually, Walter taught me a lot about photography when I got started back in I think it was 2012 when I bought my first interchangeable lens camera. I can remember when um, I didn't even know what aperture was. I had no idea. I knew nothing about cameras. I just knew I wanted a nicer camera and wanted to take better pictures and did all the usual and bought a camera. And Walter was really very helpful in helping me get started learning about photography. And he's been doing this a lot longer than me, as many of you have. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring Walter on today was for Capture 121. Capture One has just released a new version of their photo editing software, and he's really a specialist on that particular software. And that's his primary photo editing software, and he's done a lot of things in the forums and groups on Facebook. He's been a moderator in some of these groups and forums, but he also answers a lot of questions there as well. So he's kind of the go-to guy for Capture One in a lot of places. And he's also started his own YouTube channel, Walter Rowe Photography, which is primarily right now based on doing tutorials for Capture One. So if you're interested in learning more about Capture One or how to use it, I recommend going to his channel. But also, the reason, I wanted to talk about Capture One today because, as many of you know, I do my own photo editing live streams, but I use primarily just the free software Olympus Workspace for Olympus cameras. And you can see a lot of times my frustration with that software. And I don't complain because it's free, but there are certainly very good options out there. And Capture One is one of the best, if not the best, photo editing software for many photographers. Robin Wong is an avid user of Capture One and he shoots Olympus. So I think for a lot of you out there that shoot Olympus, Capture One is definitely a viable option as well. So that all said, um, I can put my microphone on. Oh, sorry, but I'll have Walter on here in a minute and bring him in for everyone to see. I just always like to kind of get the video and sound check done with my viewers. Like someone said, the mic is not right, but thank goodness I got it. I got it on now. So let me check the comments. We have, usual suspects here: Roberto, John, David. Good to see everyone. And I need to get my clipboard. Hold on. Because as you know, my live streams are, and my videos for that matter, are never scripted. I usually just sit down, turn the computer on, and just start to talk. But I did make some notes, and I didn't show Walter any of these questions I have yet. But I do have a lot of questions about Capture One myself. Hopefully they're, from a new user point of view, because I'm not a user of Capture One. But okay, so while we're talking, I'm going to try to monitor any questions you might have, but if you can hold them off till after we kind of go through this initial interview or discussion, if you want to have some questions about Capture One, that would be the time to ask, because then I can kind of focus on it, because you know me, I can't think and chew gum at the same time, so it would be helpful to me if you did that. But okay, so without further ado, let's hope I push the right button and I can bring Walter in. And there's a slight lip syncing delay. that I am aware of that, or we are. So just we'll just have to deal with it. I don't know why it's doing that this time when it didn't do it last time. But okay. Find my mouse. And here we go. Hey, Walter, how's it going?
Hey Rob, how are you?
Good, good.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good to see you. So Walter.
I will tell you while we were paused, my lights turned themselves off. They're on battery power and the fans are running. So if things suddenly go dark on my end, it might be my
Oh,
lights,
okay.
and I might have to switch to a different light midstream here. But we'll muddle our way through.
Sure, sure. I mean, you know, technical difficulties in a robtrek stream is a mandatory. Just saying. It wouldn't be it
Sure.
wouldn't be a Trek stream without, you know, something going wrong. I'll just be happy if we
Yeah,
can
never.
stay connected and online long enough to answer everyone's questions actually. So
Sure.
anyway, I'll go ahead and let you get started. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, and then lead into Capture One.
Okay. As you know, my name is Walter Rowe. I am a Capture One affiliate, which means I do try and market Capture One. I get a small commission when people use my links, but I don't work for Capture One. I don't have any official capacity or relationship with them. You can akin this to, for example, having your own little marketplace on Amazon, for example, where you get a little pass through. So that's kind of my only relationship. I have been a photographer since the early 2000s. Rob talked about how we met. My wife and Rob were high school classmates. They met in 10th grade. And then I met my wife after they were out of college in 1992. And that's when I met Rob. And we've been friends ever since. I actually have some older pictures. Rob says he didn't start photography till later, but I have pictures that prove otherwise. um, Rob, you may remember your Great Falls pictures.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
my
we,
God. Yeah, that was in college days with a little pocket point and shoot in film.
yeah. So anyway, so I've been photographing. I've kind of been around. I've done concert photography. I've done nature and travel photography, and now specialize in portrait photography. And Capture One I started using in 2014, 2015. I had been an Adobe user. I had used Apple Aperture because I didn't like the performance of Adobe, and I didn't like the user interface of Lightroom. And I'm running on Mac OS. And Apple Aperture at the time was really solid and stable. Apple was really putting money in it, and I really was kind of bought into their system. And in 2014, Apple said they were ceasing development of Aperture, so I for a new home and went back, tested Lightroom. Lightroom just still wasn't doing it for me, and so then I went back and played with Capture One, and at that point it was version 8.3, I think, and it just seemed to kind of click with me. And I just started doing new pictures in Capture One and got my feel for it and decided, okay, the way I'm really going to immerse myself in Capture One and really learn it is I'm going to take all of my 50,000 whatever pictures and I'm going to migrate them into Capture One from Aperture. And Capture One had an import tool that they developed that imported Apple Aperture libraries. So I started plucking out subsets of pictures, moving them into Capture One and editing them. And, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And I don't know if I put 10,000 hours into it, but that exercise really helped me learn a lot about Capture One because I have pictures from various cameras from Nikon D100, Canon PowerShot G5, all the way to the current D850 Nikon and Z7 Nikon. So, D100, 200, 300, 800, 850, I've used them, and I've developed all those raw files in Capture One. I've gotten very accustomed to Capture One. So I really, really am completely immersed in it at this point. And I rarely go into Photoshop except for some detailed pixel editing that you just can't do in Capture One. That is one of the things you can't do. And then there's some other features in Capture One, like merging multiple photos together, that you can't do in Capture One. Capture One really is it's a raw editor for an individual file.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I think you did talk a little bit about why you started using Capture One. I mean, what would you say was Capture One's biggest advantage, say, over, the more popular editors out there, or other popular editors, I should say?
For me, I really like working with layers. And when I first started using Capture One, they had a few tools that you could use in a layer. And in probably over like 2 versions of upgrades, they made every tool available on layers. And with layers, you can paint a mask on the image, and you can apply any adjustments. And obviously, where the mask is applied, the adjustments apply. And with masks, you can have brush adjustments for the density of the brush, the size of the brush, the softness, the flow. And then the layers themselves also have opacity. So you can, not only can you control, with the brush itself, heavier in some areas, lighter in others, but you can also then fine tune again with layer opacity. And in version, I don't know, I think version 20, they added radial masks and luminosity masks, and so that just made it even more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So layers is really, to me, that's the real core. And then obviously the other thing is color editing. Capture One has enormous flexibility in managing colors for accuracy, and then also for color grading with the color balance tool.
Okay. So, I mean, those are some, being able to layer and control those layers is definitely a huge advantage over, say, Lightroom. I know in Lightroom you can kind of port over to Photoshop, but that workflow is a little bit cumbersome, I think, for, photographers, editors that just want to work on the one app and streamline their editing process. So
that's right.
You don't, and then usually when you do that, when you loop out of Photoshop and come back, you have 2 files now instead of just one, right?
That's right.
And that's another huge advantage to using, I think, Capture One is, you got a single file with just a meta file on the side, I guess, with all the updates. So it's a non-destructive process as well. And
that's correct. It's completely non-destructive. For me, the user interface was also very attractive.
Mm-hmm.
In Lightroom, when you switch from library to develop to book or whatever, these different modules, you experience a little bit of a lag in that switch itself, and the entire screen, the whole user interface changes.
Yeah, exactly.
And in Capture One, it's a bit like Photoshop. You have the viewer or browser panel on one side, and then you have the toolbar, the tools in a column on the side, and the tool, we'll see in a minute. We'll demonstrate the application, but there's different tabs that have different sets of tools in them, and they're customizable. Mm-hmm. But as you switch between those tabs, what's available in the viewer itself on the right-hand side never changes. Right. So if I'm looking at a particular area of an image, I can switch to different tools, and that doesn't change. So I can stay focused on the image and, the area of the image that I'm working on. and move
Right.
between different
So there's
tools.
some continuity there as you're editing in different modes.
That's right.
Right. And I think, you know, I mean, Capture One has so many features, and I used the demo, I guess, about 2 years ago, and
Yep.
I can talk
Yep.
about the reasons that I'm not using Capture One later, but uh, you know, of all the features and all the powerful features that Capture One has, you know, what would you say is your favorite one that you think, I don't know, the one that you like or that you use in your own photography, particularly your portrait photography?
My favorite tool for an adjustment tool lately has been the heal tool. Uh, they made a significant change in the healing tools in Capture 20.1, which came out about 9 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this this was a whole new level of healing that enabled me to do a lot of skin retouching natively in Capture One, which kind of makes it right as close to the raw source as possible. And I find that I almost never have to go into like a pixel editor like Photoshop or Affinity Photo to use frequency separation. Now, part of that is also my taste in portraiture. Some people really go for that high-end glamour. You know, they're looking for the Vogue,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, you know, cosmopolitan cover, that very high-end fashion. That's not my style of portrait photography. You know, I want people to look, you know, I want people to look nice, look their best. You know, people like to have the dark circles taken away from their eyes
Yeah.
and things of that nature. But, you know, I don't try and turn them into something that they're not. I don't want them to look like a porcelain doll, you know, plasticky, that, you know,
Right.
all that skin smoothing and all that stuff. You know, I'll use those techniques where I have to for the purpose of getting rid of, you know, blemishes that you know are temporary, you know, acne, complexion issues. If a person really has something that they want taken off their face, but is actually a permanent mark, but they don't
Mm-hmm.
like it, you know, I'll do that for them. So the healing tool is really
Okay.
that's my new favorite tool.
Yeah, you know, when you have me and your, you know, you've taken a lot of pictures of, well, not a lot, but several pictures of me, and you never fix these bags under my eyes.
I got some fixes now, Rob. I'll show
If
you.
you don't mind, you know, if you're going to edit me, edit this. But
I'll give you I can give you a little help.
yeah, if you don't mind, you know, because when you do portraits, you know, people want to look 10 times better than they do in real life. And, you
Sure.
know, especially some people, you know, you take a picture of them, let me see that picture. No, no,
Right.
no, no, no.
Right.
I have
No.
double chin in that picture. Says, well, you got
I
a double
I
chin in
had a
real life.
client that I took portraits for a client recently where she wanted to see every picture on the back of the camera as I took it.
Yeah,
And
wow.
just it was probably the hardest portrait session I've ever had. It was an outdoor portrait session. It was a little chilly outside. It was dusk. You know, the light was low, and it just, you know, I don't know. It was a challenge,
Yeah.
and I I did the editing. I think the pictures turned out marvelous. I sent her a link here. You can download the you know the digital copies that they paid for. Never heard a word out of the client. Never once. No, these are great. No, thank yous. No, I don't know if they maybe they were really unhappy. I don't know.
Did they
It
buy
was a
anything?
challenge. No, no prints. I in the price it included digital copies, so they got
Oh,
digital
okay,
copies, and I
okay.
think that's really what
So
they
you got
wanted
paid at
anyway. They
least.
wanted. Oh yeah, I got paid.
Okay.
I always get paid.
Good, good.
No, no,
Um,
no check, no pictures. Sorry.
sure.
You know,
And we'll
you
we'll
got to
talk a
pay
little bit
me at the
about
time of the session.
your professional, your business side of your photography, but I wanted to kind of finish a little bit about on Capture One. I
Yep.
think one of the other things that probably doesn't get talked about enough is just the overall performance of Capture One. And if you could speak to that a little
Performance,
bit
definitely.
versus,
Yeah,
say,
performance.
Lightroom.
Yeah. So in Lightroom, you know, that was one of the reasons that when Apple said they're ceasing development of Aperture, I knew I had to find a new home. Aperture would probably continue to run for a little while, but there was going to be changes at some point in Mac OS that would break it, and I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried Lightroom. Again, it was that whole switching of the interface I didn't like. And on my Mac, in Mac OS, the performance just wasn't great. It took a while to start the application. Once you started making adjustments, the adjustments were okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, switching over to the develop module, having it actually load a one-to-one preview, these things all take time. And when you're working on, batches of pictures, let's say you've got a portrait session.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, heaven forbid the wedding photographers out there that have to do, hundreds or thousands of pictures from a all-day wedding engagement. I mean, I can't imagine that. To me, that the performance just wasn't there. So when I tried Capture One, boy, it starts up. It actually builds. Lightroom has what they call smart proxies, right? Capture One builds proxies from the get-go, and they are effectively smart proxies. So you don't have to say build smart proxies; they're just there. So when you import your photos, you wait for those proxies to be generated. But once they're there, super fast performance, always available, and they always look great. And you can edit pictures actually at one time, and we'll demonstrate that.
Yeah, and that's all about the, I think this is personally what I see is where Capture One excels is the, all of the improvements in the workflow and saving time there for your editing, and then on the back end, the processing, the processing side is very quick and performance orientated. So you're not really being, they've optimized every level of the editing process because it's really a dedicated photo editing software. And when I used it, I thought the color wheels and the some of the other controls were much more intuitive than Lightroom, and really gave me controls that is awkward in Lightroom. Sometimes Lightroom would have a slider, but in Capture One, they would have sort of a color wheel. If I remember correctly, that was just was easier to use and more intuitive. So I liked a lot of things about Capture One. And that's, and you've talked about some of the advantages, we've talked about some of the advantages Capture One has over, say, Lightroom. But what do you feel like is maybe some advantages Lightroom, Photoshop have over Capture One and I'll lead into why I still use Lightroom.
Well, I know what's going to be your first one, and I'll put that right up there, right? So in a lot of people like to take, especially if you're blending in multiple images, they want to take a picture, maybe like you do real estate photography. So you have to take bracketed exposures, right? You want an exposure that gets the scene that's outside the window that looks right, but then the room itself looks dark.
Right.
Well, then you want that exposure for the room itself that looks correct, but now the outside is all blown out, and you want to open those together in a single file on layers, and then blend them together in Photoshop. Capture One cannot send multiple files to Photoshop and have it open as layers. They have a script that supposedly can do it. One of the things that Capture One can do on Mac OS is that it has an Apple script interface, but that's not available on Windows. Somebody has written a script, but it basically bakes an RGB file, like a TIFF or a PSD, and then tells Photoshop to open them up as layers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a workaround. It's not as intuitive or direct as Lightroom, where you can highlight
that's
those
on the
3 or 4
workflow side, but I
say,
think the main issue I had with it was I couldn't layer photos within Capture One, so that rules out bracketing shots, to capture the wider dynamic range of using multiple exposures. Also HDR as a feature, panoramas. There's a lot of these fancy niche type things that you can't really do in Capture One.
So Capture One cannot merge multiple files together. You can't do HDR blending. You can't do focus stacking merging,
Hmm.
where you like maybe have a macro and maybe like the Z7, and I know other cameras can do this. You take a sequence of images that move the focal plane through a scene,
Right.
and then you blend them all together so that you get a maximum depth of field.
Right.
And then you can't do pano stitching. Anything that's merging multiple images together, Capture One cannot do that.
Right.
You have to go to Photoshop or Affinity Photo or some other pixel
Right.
editor
And
for
I think
that.
Affinity Photo is a nice complement for those features to Capture One. Uh,
I've been using Affinity Photo more, and I can't remember the last time I opened Photoshop.
yeah.
I'm trying to learn Affinity Photo better because
Hmm.
I anticipate actually killing my Adobe subscription.
Yeah. And a lot of people have, because I think beyond all of the features and the workflow, and because not all of us are working with 500 images or 1,000 images from a session, or you know uh, worried about that this software is 10 seconds faster than that software. But I think a lot of things that a lot of people are drawn to Capture One for the overall raw processing as well.
Yep.
And when you import images from Capture One and from, say, Lightroom into Lightroom, when I did it 2 years ago with my Nikon cameras, gosh, it must have been longer than that because I haven't shot Nikon. Man, time flies. Uh, but what?
If I remember correctly, that was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, Rob, because I was starting to use Capture One, and we talked about it, and
Yeah,
you downloaded and played with it, and
yeah,
you really like the tethering. It's unbeatable for tethering for
right,
those
right.
that like to do that.
And that's another
Um,
thing we'll talk about, I guess. But I think that the raw processing, I was always impressed with the images that came in. It was very difficult to duplicate in Lightroom. When I import images in the Lightroom, they always look a little bit soft, or the contrast or the color, something is just a little bit off, compared to
yeah,
when
I don't know what magic sauce they have in Capture One. When you have a raw file and you turn it into something you see on screen, it goes through a demosaic process.
right.
You're because each pixel really only represents a red, a green, or blue, and you have to do some magic math to figure out what are the other missing parts of that RGB pixel.
Hmm.
And there must be some magic for one that's a little finer detail oriented, right? So
Yeah.
when you pull that picture up, it just looks more detailed. And I know a lot of people that are Fuji users, for example, who bailed on Adobe Lightroom because they said it just couldn't render the detail that they knew was in their pictures. And they tried Capture One, and Capture One was able to get every ounce of detail
Yeah.
out of their pictures.
Absolutely. That was one of the things, is I did feel it did draw the details in much better. Um, and again, the colors, because they have a special thing now. I guess they've always had it, but they have these ICC profiles for specific cameras.
Well,
And
Adobe has those as well.
hmm.
They do. Adobe does create their own profiles
Hmm.
for each camera. That's why you see when, for example, right now the Z6 II, Adobe says they now support the Z6 II camera, but they don't have their custom profiles for it. So they haven't really been through all the battery of tests to really understand the color responsiveness, the tonal range, and all these
Hmm.
things of the Z6 II. Capture
Right.
One is the same. They take their each camera and they put it through hundreds or thousands of tests of
Right.
images and all kinds of settings to build that custom ICM, that input profile.
Right. And that's exactly why I think a lot of people are drawn to Capture One, is because it is so much better at working with the raw image, uh, getting the colors right, getting the details right. That whole back end processing that it does to the raw image before you even see it on the screen, uh, just brings out the very best that camera is capable of.
Yeah.
And and I think with the color, with the way it controls color and fine details, Capture One makes a really excellent sort of studio type software, which I wanted to talk a little bit about the tethering as well, because that was the other thing that really impressed me was the tethering tool built into um, Capture One, and unfortunately, I don't think they've done it for Olympus yet, but just about every other manufacturer, the tethering tool is way superior to Lightroom, at least from what I remember. So if you could speak to that a little bit, and you know what you think about that.
So the history of Capture One is, Capture One is was owned by Phase One. Phase One makes medium format cameras, and the original Phase One digital backs didn't have storage in the camera itself. Like, you didn't put a memory card in there. You had to tether it to a computer, and you use the computer to actually manage and capture the photos. So it was effectively a tethered solution from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So the core of Capture One has been tethering from day one. So to control every aspect of the camera and the image capture process, and then being able to, for example, bring in a picture, capture a frame, make a few adjustments to say, okay, now I've kind of tweaked what's going to happen to these pictures when I bring them in, and then have those adjustments automatically apply to the next frame as you bring them in, is really amazing. And then they also have the ability to, they have a mobile app called Capture Pilot. For example, clients, people who do editorial or fashion or other types of things. You don't want the client sitting there over your shoulder as you're taking your pictures, but you can give them a mobile app on your iPad where, as they're brought into Capture One and Capture One has applied those adjustments, they can see it real time right on their iPad, without kind of hovering around you. So you get your, you don't feel like they're clingy on top of you, but they're still there and they're able to guide the process. And if they have recommendations or if they know, something specific they want changed because they're trying to send a certain message, they can give you that feedback right away.
Right. Yeah. And that, I can only imagine, like in a corporate setting, you go to the client's site, you set up your laptop, and everyone has iPads, etc. But you give them an iPad to review the images as you're taking them, and they get that instant feedback.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful, I think, in terms of, when you're looking for referrals and things, it just kind of gives you that edge over, say, other photographers that don't use these kinds of tools that Capture One offers.
It's a level of professionalism. It instills a great deal of confidence. The client's going to see, an actual edited image. It may not be fully edited. Oh, there went one of my lights.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You look good.
It's probably going to happen to the other one in a second here. So the client, it instills confidence in the client at the time that you're taking the photos too. It's, because they're not waiting for some day or days for pictures to show up. There went through the light. Give me a second to pop these back on.
Okay. So how's everybody doing this morning otherwise? This is I'm gonna ask Walter to give us a couple of demonstrations. I think he said he had prepared a couple of things, and then we'll go right into the Q&A about Capture One. If you have any questions or want to give some questions for Walter or for myself. Yeah, that looks good. Let me put you back in. I think it's this one. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So they're not as bright as they were. Hopefully that'll make them last a little longer.
Okay.
Sorry about that, folks.
It's fine. Like I said, it wouldn't be a Trek stream without some technical issue. I jinx everybody. When I go on to other people's streams in the chat section, suddenly their audio goes out. And but anyway, I think you had talked about, or you mentioned early that you were going to show us a few things. I guess
Sure.
You were going to share a screen, right? Because I think people are interested to see what are the new things in Capture 21, some of the new features. Uh, I looked up a couple from their site. They have some. I think the tooltips are very helpful, and the speed editing is very
Yeah.
interesting tool. And then maybe some finer details, things that you like about the new version or recent versions of Capture One. So I'll switch over to full screen, and then we'll go to a Q&A session after you finish your little presentation.
All right. Let me know if you see my application here.
Uh, it'll be up
Uh,
in just a second. It's still
Still
it's still
rendering.
just you right now.
Oh. No, I think the screen isn't switched to screen.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay.
Is it? Are you actually seeing the application?
No, I see the application in Skype. I don't see it on my YouTube yet. Leave it up for just a minute and see if it
Okay.
comes in. I'll give it 20 seconds. It shouldn't take that long though.
I don't know why that wouldn't
Let
should be
me
showing up.
yeah, leave it up for a second. Maybe I need to do something on mine. There is this.
And my little Skype preview still shows me.
Yeah, there is a separate thing here.
Okay.
Hold on. No, there we go. So when you want to go back,
Now I
yeah,
see it
when you
in the
want to go
Skype
back to
preview.
your,
Good.
well, let me know when you're done and I'll go back to the split screen.
Okay. Okay. So here's the interface for Capture One. On the left hand side, you have these little row of icons. Uh, these are the tool tabs. So as you can see, I can switch between these different tool tabs, and the tools change, but my view on the right doesn't change. Seeing the thumbnails, that's like grid mode in Lightroom. They call this the browser. And if I hit the G key and I go to what is like the E key in Lightroom, it's the viewer mode. So then you see the whole image. And of course, you can change the zoom on the image to zoom in. You can pan around. All the things you normally expect from a photo editor. Then let's see. So this is the actual tethering tab here. In the tethering tab, there's all kinds of camera controls. There's controlling the focus. There's adjusting the camera settings. There's controlling the naming format and the location where the images are going to be stored. There's the profile that's applied to them. You can apply metadata presets from, if you want to configure a preset or, before you start your session. So they even have overlays. So people that do work for like magazines and things like that, if the magazine has a mock-up of like that has like the title of the magazine and some other things that they can put in like a transparent overlay, you can bring those right in, and then as you're doing it's like a live view with your camera, but you can overlay what would look like the magazine cover in real time, right on the picture that you're about to take. So it kind of helps you with framing and zoom and kind of all the whole composition stuff and where text and things might go around. And then Capture Pilot is effectively that it's kind of like a server that you start on the workstation itself that the mobile app is able to talk to so that it can see the pictures as they're taken. We have other tabs. There's lens correction tabs. So they have a big database of lenses. They're not so quick to do third-party lenses, although you can see they have a big list of lenses. They have Sigma lenses, Zeiss. They do have a pretty sizable database of lenses. but they also have generic profiles, and then you can adjust the distortion and sharpness and fall off yourself. There's purple fringing that you can adjust, the normal crop, rotation, keystone corrections that you're used to. One thing I will say that Lightroom really does excel at is the transform tool. Lightroom, you can go into an image and kind of click that auto button. It automatically determines the vertical and horizontals and applies the appropriate corrections to make them truly vertical and horizontal.
Yeah, that works. That works about 90%. Because I use that tool a lot myself, being in architecture.
So that 90% is 90% more than what you get out of Capture One. Okay.
Yeah, but
so Capture One, it's not automatic.
But I see in the top center there, you do have a keystoning type tool.
So there's a keystone tool, and you can do vertical, horizontal, or both. And if I bring up both, I don't know if it's maybe really hard to see in this picture. There's little circles here on the screen. And what you do is you drag and drop those circles and line them up where you want them to, what does it look like, if it were truly vertical or horizontal. And then you click the apply button here in the center and it adjusts it. Let me reset keystone here. So here I've reset keystone. You can see this orange now is highlighted in this picture. And let me just drag it down to kind of like this dark line of this pillar. And let me hit the same dark line on the other side. So that might be horizontal there. I don't really have a good horizontal reference on this side. Maybe the sidewalk. So if I want to get this kind of horizontal, there's a dotted line. It's probably very hard to see, but you kind of drag that along the edge of the sidewalk, and okay, now I want the sidewalk to be level. And then, how I position it left and right it controls how much of the vertical correction it does. Maybe that looks about right to kind of correct the correction of the pillars to kind of lean in. And if I hit apply, then it adjusts it. Now that's probably a bit too much there, but you get the idea. But that's kind of the way that you adjust it. But you've also got the ability to manually adjust it over here in the tool itself.
Right.
So if you don't have the places in the picture that are easy to align, or if you just prefer using the sliders, I tend to use the sliders myself more than anything. Then that's typically what I do is I just go right to the sliders and I just adjust the sliders. I've just gotten adept at it, and it works pretty fast. So I'm just really comfortable doing that.
Right.
So that is the keystone. So it does have keystone correction. Then we talked about color. So here's all of the amazing stuff. There's typical color balance. They have a color editor, and color editor has three different tabs for color editing. If I go into something like a portrait, they have a skin tone editor where I can select not just the color that I want to adjust, and I get the hue and saturation and lightness that I want. I can also adjust the uniformity of that color. So if a person has variation in skin tone and you want it to kind of all come closer to being a similar skin tone or skin color, you can adjust the uniformity of that, and that will adjust the skin tone. And of course, the typical way you would use this is actually to use this on a layer. So we talked about layers, and in the layer tool, I could just say new empty adjustment layer, which means it has no mask. Then I could use the B key, adjust my brush size, and just paint in a mask on the person's face, maybe. Let me go in, I'll just say fill the mask. So now I filled the mask. So now if I go and do the skin tone adjustment and pick a color, then any adjustments I make are of course, only limited to exactly the area where the mask applies and not to the rest of the scene. So, I can adjust the uniformity, uh, uniformity of lightness, uniformity of the saturation,
Mm-hmm.
uniformity of the hue, and then, what is the lightness or the darkness. The skin tone adjustment is, it's much more subtle.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an advanced tab where you can pick colors and you can do really, far out adjustments on here. I mean, I could go pick a color here and move the hue, and I can really move it, way, way far.
Right.
And you can actually do this in multiple layers and accumulate them. You could literally rotate the colors 180 degrees around the color wheel
Mm-hmm.
just by stacking these layers up
She looks like she's
and
about
doing
to
this.
hurl.
Exactly, right? So I'll get rid of that layer. We don't need
Yeah,
that
if you don't
anymore.
mind, I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sure she would. Yes.
I remember you were showing a sort of a unique way to use the dehaze tool on a portrait.
I did.
Yeah.
So, in fact, here's where we'll go and feature you.
Oh.
So here, Rob and I, Rob came up one afternoon. We went to a local sunflower field. And so, Rob, you talked about the circle under the eyes. Actually, I don't know if I did that in this one. I didn't have to on this one because it's pretty well filled in
Yeah, it's good
already.
lighting.
Oh, actually, you know what
You
I did? I
on my
think I
right
used
eye,
dehaze to do that.
definitely.
Actually, I did it using the dehaze layer. I did it with dehaze. Maybe. Well, no, maybe not. Okay. Anyway, let's see if this one did it. Yep, here we go. So if you see, I just disabled a layer called Dodge Dehaze on. Maybe it's a little delay in showing up.
Yeah, I did see it click on and off.
So we're close in here. So let's look underneath the eye. See the kind of little darkness of the circles here under the eye. And then I used dehaze. I used a negative dehaze here, where I actually push the levels up instead of down. So it's like dodging instead of burning. And I actually did a nice job because you retain all the texture and it just affects the color.
Yeah, that's a lot better. That's a lot better. Now,
so
get rid of the gray hair and the double chin and straighten my teeth and brush out the nose hair.
Yep. Right on. So, that just shows you how much detail. I mean, this is a 47 megapixel file, of course, also, but there's enormous detail here. This is the full frame, and then we go into the zoom. There's every single individual eyelash. Everything is rendered perfectly. So it's really the tool really does.
Yeah, so you could start a business for people that want to have a Tinder picture for their Tinder account.
Yep.
All right. Absolutely. Was there anything else you wanted to show us here that you liked in particular? Maybe that was the dehaze. The speed editing or tool tips, things like that.
So speed editing is kind of a new feature. So one of the things that Capture One is about is shortcuts, like keyboard shortcuts. And some keyboard shortcuts they added in version 21 are called speed edit. I'm going to bring up the keyboard shortcut window here. Let me know if you see this now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see that what they've done is they've chosen keyboard shortcuts where you press and hold a key and it brings up a little slider on the bottom. And I'll demonstrate this in a second. But what's intuitive about this is the keys that they've chosen. So the 1 and 2 key are white balance, Kelvin, and you notice that's the first tool in the adjustments tab, and it's also the top row on the keyboard. And then you have exposure, contrast, brightness, and saturation, which is QWER. That's the second tool in the Adjustments tab. It's the second row on the keyboard. HDR, highlight, shadow, white, and black. That's the third tool. It's the third row on the keyboard. ASDF. So they've kind of done a clever job of choosing not just having these keyboard shortcuts, but what keys they use relative to the order of the tools in the adjustment tab. So it kind of makes it easier to learn. So let me make sure I'm on the background layer here. If I hold the one key down for Kelvin, you may see this little slider pop up on the bottom of the screen. It's very small, but I can hold the left key and I can slide back and forth to adjust it. Or like in the Apple Magic Mouse, which has a glass top, you can just slide your finger over the top of the mouse, and it's like a trackpad. So I can hit the Q key, that brings up exposure. So now I can adjust exposure, and do what So this is kind of direct. Left hand selects the tool, right hand makes the adjustment. I can adjust, all I have to do is press and hold the key for the corresponding tool with the left hand and make the adjustment with the right hand. And what's really powerful about this is I can have multiple images selected. I can bring them up. And now if I make an adjustment, for example, if I want to make an exposure adjustment and I hold down the Q key to bring up exposure, notice that underneath each image, it shows what the current exposure number is. And if I make an adjustment, it's not making the adjustment value the same on each of those. It's adjusting them all equally by the same relative amount. So if I do a plus 0.5, each of them gets a plus 0.5. It's not like copying and pasting an explicit number. It's adjusting each of them equally.
Right. It's all relative to their current.
So when you're doing batch editing, this is really powerful.
Yeah, I could definitely see a use for that. In my real estate photography, I do have to match the brightness of the images room to room because it does change quite a bit. So I'll work on each image individually, and then I can go into this sort of thumbnail view and adjust them all at the same time to get to the level. Because your eyes kind of get numb to all your adjustments after a while, and then seeing them all side by side. But this is one of the great things about Capture One, and I'm going to switch back over to a split screen for us, Walter.
Okay.
And let's see if that worked. If you could switch over, yeah, there we go. I think it's this one.
Now let me stop my screen sharing. That probably would help.
Yeah, there we go. Good. And that's kind of the overall feeling I get about Capture One. Is it's all about speeding up the workflow, whether it's how you work through the images, either individually or in bulk, or on the back end in the processing. Like you said, it builds the proxies up front so that the workflow is faster through the entire session. And that's the last thing I wanted to ask you about, actually, was the data asset management side of Capture One versus Lightroom. I thought it was interesting, and I never was able to get my head around what's the difference between, say, a session and a catalog. Because in Lightroom, we have a catalog that keeps track of all the metadata and all the images, and you can throw keywords in and all of that. But how is sessions? Why did Capture One use sessions, and what is that?
So Capture One has catalogs, which are akin to Lightroom catalogs. You ingest pictures into the catalog, and the catalog learns where they are on disk. You have a folders tool that tells you where they are on disk, and you can navigate there.
Right.
But all of the adjustments are stored in a SQLite database in the catalog. Lightroom uses SQLite Capture One uses SQLite. Everybody that does catalog stuff like this uses SQLite for their database. But
Yeah, and first, non-programmers and things, what is SQL?
SQL is structured query language. It's a it's a it's a way to query and make updates to databases.
Okay.
So SQLite is effectively freeware, and that's why a lot of companies use it. They don't have to pay a licensing fee for it.
Right.
And it's powerful, and because the application is the only user of it, it doesn't have to be a multi-user type application like you would like an enterprise database.
Right.
So, but that's kind of in the weeds. But so there's a database that has all of the adjustments. They're not in a file anywhere. They're a database. Sessions are very much about files. So the adjustments, the metadata, everything is stored in files and tucked away in a special little folder. So you don't have to worry about a corrupt database. Every individual image has its own file with its corresponding adjustments and metadata. So they're actually very lightweight. They're very portable. A session is in a folder structure that it's like a predefined folder structure. If we switch back to my screen for a second, I'll show you a session that I have open.
1 second. This is a feature I rarely use, but let's see, wrong one. This one. There we go. Okay, we can see it now.
Okay, so I've got Finder open, and I wanted to illustrate what is a session from the operating system, like Windows Explorer or Mac OS Finder. It's in a folder called robtrek. This, by the way, all the up for us to edit, and I use it. I have a dedicated session just for those pictures. And so you see this folder. There's a capture folder. That's where your pictures get ingested into. There's an output folder. That's where all of your processed images go. They have a selects folder, so you could say, well, I've sorted all my pictures, and now I really want to just I have certain ones I want to select, and I only want to put those in my selects folder, so I just drag them there, and now I can just work out of the selects folder. So it's a way to just kind of separate out the really preferred images versus the ones that were actually captured. Of course, you also have ratings and labels and other ways to filter them as well. And then of course there's a trash folder as well. So when you say I want to move something to the trash, that's where it goes. So it isn't really gone. It's just moved to a different folder. It's like the recycle bin in your operating system. And then they do have a session database, but the session database is just more about metadata about the session. The actual adjustments for the pictures are stored in the capture folder. See, there's a settings folder here that actually has all of the settings, and there's a cache folder that has all the proxies and thumbnails. So this little that's where all the stuff is stored. So it's not in a central database. It's actually in files on disk. One file per image. So you don't risk losing everything because the database got corrupt and all of the settings for all your pictures are suddenly lost. And every picture has its own file. So if one file got corrupt, you only lost that one file. You didn't lose everything. But I've never had a session that got corrupt where I lost the adjustments. I've had a couple of occasions where the database got corrupt in a catalog, and that was a bit harrowing. But back up, right?
Right. Okay, let me try and go back to the split screen. Sorry, I had two mics on at the same time, so there was some echo there. But we should be good now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. Again, it's not a robtrek stream without some technical issue. I'll get it right eventually, maybe in a couple of years. But okay, that was awesome, Walter. And like I said, I think Capture One is definitely worth giving a shot, particularly if you don't use any editor now. it's good to start with one, and I think you'll be, more than happy with Capture One in the long term. And if you're currently using a product, definitely it's worth comparing against in terms of your workflow, particularly if you work with a lot of images. Um, and you want to, you'll probably save hours and hours, of work, in workflow and editing time with Capture One, because their focus is not only on the image quality of the raw processing side, but like I said, also the workflow and the speed of editing and getting through the images. So I think I did put links down below to Walter's affiliate link for Capture One, and you can download a free trial. And how
Yep.
long do they get on the free trial? Do you know offhand?
You get 30 days, and you get
Mm-hmm.
all the features full. Capture One Pro. When you activate it, you specify you want Capture One Pro, and you get full 30 days. And Capture One Pro is the version that supports that basically unlocks every camera model they support. They have branded
Mm-hmm.
editions, which like Capture One for Sony or for Nikon or for Fuji.
Mm-hmm.
But those only edit those brand of raw files. They don't do DNG files, and they don't do other brands' raw files. They only
Oh
do,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I do have the Fuji version, which is, and it's not really a full pro version even. It's a watered down
you
version.
got the Fuji Express version, yes,
Yeah, but
that's
like you
right.
were saying, they have the because you can get free version, a watered down version of Capture One
Yep,
for certain cameras,
that
and
that's right. Sony, Fuji, and Nikon, they had the Express version and the Pro version.
mhm,
The Express version has fewer features unlocked. The Pro version gives you all the features, but only for that brand of camera. And then if you get the
right,
full Pro, you get all the features and, of course, all the cameras they
right.
support.
So there's a little bit of savings, I think, right? If you just get one for a specific camera model.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the number off the top of my head. I think it's like 300 US,
Hmm.
299 US for the full print, and I don't know, 100 something maybe if it's the branded.
Yeah,
And then the Express version is free.
and they do offer a subscription model as well, right? So you can use it for
They
several
offer, yeah,
months,
yep.
and
You can do a month-to-month subscription, or you
mhm,
can do a prepaid annual subscription, which is a discount. I think it's $20 if it's a month-to-month, and it's
right.
15 a month if you do the annual commitment.
Right. So, that's another option. If you need more time than the 30-day free trial, you can just go to the subscription model and then maybe switch over to a full-on, one-time fee type model
Yep.
later. I think, that's they give you that option, unlike Lightroom and some other products that are subscription only. And, that really caught a lot of flack, when Adobe went to that model. And I think deservedly so, because a lot of people, they they're they would like to just buy the software and just use it for as long as they need to use it, rather than having to pay every single month. Because there's people
Yeah.
still using Lightroom 5 from like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and
So
but it doesn't
there
support
are
any new
people that
cameras.
so the Lightroom, if you stop paying your subscription, you can still run Lightroom,
Hmm.
but you don't get access to the develop module.
Mm.
And what really burns people is, well, I paid for, the product, and maybe I can't develop new pictures, but maybe I want to make some tweaks to my old pictures. Well, you
Yeah,
can't. You're
yeah,
stuck. They're frozen in time, if you will. You can
yeah.
export them, you can manage the metadata, but you can't make any more adjustments if you stop paying that subscription. That is the foul. That is the challenge.
Right.
And Capture One, if you don't pay your subscription, you don't get access to the software at all. So that's, some people don't like that, but you can buy perpetual license. And let's say someday I decide, I'm bailing out of photography. I'm not going to do it professionally anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, but I do want to continue to be able to use the tool, for the pictures that I have. I could change from subscription over to perpetual license and continue using that version for as
Right.
long as it runs on my system, into the
Right.
future.
Okay. So again, I have the links down below for the free trial, or if you just want to purchase this and you're ready. But I do recommend you do the free trial and see how that works out for you. Like I said, for me personally, because of the lack of being able to stack images, which is all I do in my professional work, is kind of rules Capture One out for me as a professional. But you can see, if I wasn't doing that kind of work, if I was, say, a portrait photographer, product photographer, really just about every other kind of photography, uh, Capture One is definitely superior in many ways to Lightroom, I think. And let's go ahead and open up any questions. I see a couple questions coming in, so go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat section that you have for Walter. Those are pretty much all the questions I had. And I see one here from Nature with Music. He's asking, can Capture One work with Final Cut Pro so the database can be revealed direct when working in Final Cut Pro?
I'm not aware of any integration with Final Cut Pro. I think that's something that Final Cut Pro would have to implement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a closed database. The model for all of the data in the database is closed. You can obviously export RGB files and then bring them into Final Cut Pro, but that's not bringing in the raw files.
Okay, I don't even know what Final Cut Pro. I'm just not a Mac guy.
The Final Cut Pro is a lot of people do use it for producing video content, especially when you have lots of sources. You see, even TV advertisements, product advertisements. Mm-hmm. It's a video editing tool.
I see. Is there a way to convert? This is from Chuck Eckert. Is there a way to convert a Lightroom catalog to Capture One?
Yes. The answer is yes. Capture One can import Apple Aperture libraries and Adobe Lightroom catalogs.
Okay, and what's that process like? Is it just a simple point and click, or?
It is so easy. Go into the File menu, go under Import Catalog, and choose Lightroom Catalog and point it at your catalog.
Okay.
Bang, bang, bang. It's that simple.
Will it import all of the adjustments you made when you were using Lightroom? And
it will import it will not import local adjustments. So if you've brushed in adjustments, it does not import the brushed in adjustments. That's the same for Aperture and Lightroom. It will do its best to convert adjustments that are in Lightroom to be comparable adjustments in Capture One.
Okay.
Every photo editor has its own interpretation of adjustments.
Yeah,
for example,
that makes sense.
5,000 white balance in Lightroom may not be the same as 5,000 white balance in Capture One or in Apple Aperture or in DxO Photo Lab or name a tool.
Right.
They're a little different. The exposure or the brightness or whatever they differ. Capture One did do some kind of reverse engineering to make that conversion, and they do try and import adjustments over, but you'll definitely have to go in and tweak all those images. They won't look exactly the same. You'll have to go back and do some adjustments in Capture One.
Right, but like say the keyword structure and
okay, all of the metadata comes over. Your ratings, your color labels. But the one thing about color labels in Lightroom lets you have custom color label sets. And Capture One only interprets the default color label set. So if you've done custom color label sets, that's not going to get carried over properly. But it does all the keywords, it does all the IPTC fields, it does your star ratings, your color labels, your keywords, all of that comes right over. So you don't lose any of that.
Right. So it sounds like
even your virtual copies come over as what they call variants in Capture One.
Oh, okay. So if you have virtual copies, because I do that a lot too, especially now.
Yep.
So basically, if you're a Lightroom user, how about other software? Are there other softwares that Capture One can import from?
Apple Aperture and Lightroom are the two that they can import from.
Okay. Okay, good. And then there's a question here from DeMorgan. He's also a professional photographer, and he's published and things. But how is the noise reduction for, say, the Micro Four Thirds at the higher ISOs and things?
I don't own a Micro Four Thirds, so it's hard to say. But I mean, I have processed a number of your Olympus files for
Hmm.
your photo editing. Edit my pictures and send them back to you. I think it does a really good job. And in the
Hmm.
like version 20, they really amped up their noise reduction tool quite a bit. They made
Mm.
major enhancements to it, and so the noise reduction is very good now in Capture One.
Oh, good, good. And here's one from Demorkin again: is can you create your own color profiles or import ones from Lightroom?
So this is a question that's often asked in the context of loots or lookup tables. Capture One doesn't directly support lookup tables, but you can create your own profiles.
Hmm.
There's two ways to do it. There's You can go into the curves tool and make adjustments in curves to adjust. Like you can start with the built-in profile, make adjustment in curves, and
Hmm.
then in the curves tool, there's a menu item that says create ICC profile, and it will make a new ICC profile, and then you can set that as the default profile for that camera.
Mm.
The other way you can do it is uh, X-Rite has their little color checker
Yeah.
that has all the color panels on it.
Yep.
You can take a picture of that color checker. You can bring it into Capture One with no adjustments, including no curves applied to it. So it doesn't even do a gamma curve or anything. And you export that as a TIFF and bring that into a color checker. I forget the name of the application now. There's an application that
Yeah.
X-Rite makes.
Yeah. I
It's
use it
free.
time to time.
Yep. So there's an application that X-Rite makes for free where you can ingest that TIFF file and kind of say, okay, here's the checker, and it'll
Hmm.
analyze all the color panels in there, and it'll produce an ICC profile, and then you can import that ICC profile into Capture One as well.
Okay. Good. Any other questions? That looked like the last one. I think this is a good point. Time, maybe if you have any last words or anything else you'd like to say about Capture One or your YouTube channel. Walter has a YouTube channel here. I recommend you go check it out, subscribe. If you want to learn more about Capture One, he has a lot of he does a lot of real life examples or real world examples of editing photos of any particular feature. But I'll leave you with the last word, Walter, because I have another stream coming up that I need to bump into that you're a regular participant of.
Okay, well, I just want to say thanks for having me on. Uh, Check out my channel. I do have a number of videos up there. I put up a few that were specific to Capture 121, which was just released a week ago. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, it was great having you, Walter. And again, I have all of Walter's links down below to his Capture One affiliate link, to his YouTube channel, also to his Instagram account that you can check out some of those photos, because I know most of those are probably edited with Capture One as well. And um, and I highly recommend you give it a 30-day trial, and see what you think. Particularly if you're not using anything now, because sometimes it's hard to change gears once you get used to one, like I have with Lightroom for so many years. It's not an easy thing sometimes to switch, but I think it's definitely
But
worth a try either way. If you're using something now or if you're not, uh, for 30 days, and follow his channel to learn how to use it. And there's so much content on Capture One as well, so it's not like uh, you get Capture One, because Capture One has a lot of tutorials and things that they've developed on their own outside of what you might find from users on
I,
YouTube. So
yeah, I wanted to actually touch on that. Thanks, Rob, for,
yeah.
for reminding me. If you go to learn.capture1.com,
Hmm.
they have a whole learning hub there. And you can branch off to their YouTube channel. They have hundreds of videos out
Wow.
there, and they do live webinars, hour-long webinars that are free. And then of course they leave them posted up there like you do your live streams,
Yeah.
so you can see them. And they're always touching on either a new feature,
Hmm.
some novel way to do things. They're just always constantly exploring the different capabilities of the tool. And then there's probably half a dozen or a dozen Capture One groups on Facebook. If you're on Facebook,
Hmm.
I'm a administrator and moderator for several of them. Capture One Technical Forum is the primary place I hang out.
Yeah.
So feel free to come join us on Facebook, ask
Hmm.
any questions, and then Capture One has their own forums. If you go to support.captureone.com, they also have their own forums there where users post and share information about
Right.
Capture One.
Right. So it's a big community. It's not a small thing, right? And
No,
that
it's
that has
not.
a lot
It's
of
a, it.
intrinsic value in itself when you get into the Capture One software of having that
Yep.
kind of support, not only from Capture One but from people like Walters. So just like a lot of you are into Olympus and you get a lot of support from me, uh, you get the same thing from people like Walter and then from Capture One itself, which a lot of companies don't do, as you know. So, all right, Walter. Well, thanks again for being here with us, and thanks everyone for being here with us as well. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to hang out with Walter and myself. We really value your time, and as always, thanks again for watching. And I will be back on Thursday for another live stream. So thanks again, Walter, and we'll see all of you next time.